Hello, my name is Brett Kirkpatrick, and I'm a staff psychologist at Towson University's Counseling Center. The purpose of today's video is to talk to students, in particular white students, about how to better understand themselves in relation to what is going on in the world today as it pertains to the worldwide protest and the removal of Confederate statues, as well as other important events that have occurred since the murder of George Floyd on May 25th of this year. If you are a student of color who is watching this video, please feel free to share any thoughts you may have as well in the comments section, and please know that I have made this video with the help, guidance, and supervision of my colleagues of color. I think the best way to talk about this is to talk from my own experience and share what I have learned, which will also reveal what I did not know and what has helped me. I never paid much attention to my racial identity, i.e. what it means to be white, until I was 33 years old. At this time, I had just returned to graduate school, and one of my professors asked our entire class of 35 people to write a paragraph answering the question, "Who am I?" If you want to now, you can think about how you would answer that question as well. After giving us some time to complete the paragraph, the professor asked each student in the entire class to read what they had written. Without fail, every person of color identified their race or ethnicity in the first sentence of their paragraph by saying things like, "I'm Chinese American," or "I'm African American," or "I'm Black," or "I'm Puerto Rican." Contrastingly, none of the white students, including myself, identified their race or ethnicity in their entire paragraph. These results were true for the entire class. I've since asked others to complete this activity and have received the same results. If you're white and you just completed this exercise for the first time, you may be feeling the same way I did after I completed it for the first time. I was confused and had questions I wasn't sure how to answer. Why were the results of this exercise so different based on race and ethnicity, and what did that mean? It may be that today, based on what's happening in the US and the world, you might also be feeling confused and have questions you're not sure how to answer. To try to answer my questions at this time, I began to try to educate myself. Educating myself fell into two categories. One was re-examining my beliefs and the life experiences that informed my beliefs. I wanted to know what I did not know. The other was reading and talking to others to learn new perspectives. Being in graduate school helped with this part a lot. Educating myself helped manage my confusion, and it also provided me with some empathy for people who were different from me. In general, taking time to pause, educate ourselves, and self-reflect is a useful process for figuring out many different things in life. One thing that I learned had a great impact on my belief system. It had to do with how white people typically view racism versus how people of color typically view racism. I learned that typically most white people view racism as defined by individual prejudice and bias, such that a person defines themselves as either racist or not racist. This resonated with me because at this time this was exactly how I thought about racism too. I believed because I didn't have any hate in my heart for people of color that I was not racist. Whereas, at this time, I learned that people of color typically viewed racism as systemic, whereby racism is infused within systems in addition to people, such as education, healthcare, and economics. For me, thinking about the systemic nature of racism allowed me to re-examine past experiences. Events that I previously thought seemed like isolated incidents now seemed connected. For instance, I grew up in New York City, a town that considers itself very liberal and progressive, which was also how I viewed myself. New Yorkers are proud to call their hometown a melting pot. However, upon educating myself, I learned that New York City is actually one of the most residentially segregated cities in America, which surprised me at the time because it's not how I originally viewed it. It was actually the opposite of how I viewed the city. I learned that segregation in New York City is not due to personal preference, but is a function of many laws that prevented and restricted residential integration, as well as subsequent racist practices which also restricted integration. This information changed my view of my hometown. I realized that my world was less integrated and less progressive than I had led myself to believe, as I realized that many neighborhoods near where I lived were neighborhoods I had not been. One thing that really helped my journey to self-reflect and educate myself is information I received from another white man many years earlier, William Coffin, who was a white man that had marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders in the 1950s and 60s, came to speak at my high school. He stated his belief that every person has bias within them, including himself. In some ways, this actually provided me comfort as it decreased my need to portray myself as not racist. It also helped me become less defensive in discussing matters pertaining to race because I wasn't afraid to be wrong or make a mistake. It helped me receive feedback from anyone and everyone because I wanted assistance in examining any biases I had. The thing about biases are that they are difficult to see on our own, which is typically what makes them biases. I think it is important to find ways to be non-defensive so that we can truly listen to others who may have differing experiences and viewpoints than ourselves. One way includes recognizing any strong emotions that emerge when we are triggered. In my personal experience, being able to truly listen to others is where personal growth and knowledge has come from. As we listen and learn, we can find ways to support our friends, family, and colleagues of color during this important time in our nation's history. In fact, finding ways to be a support for people of color during this time is one of the best ways to be involved. Supporting people of color during this time may involve going to protests, being active on social media, talking to friends and family about the underlying issues, and checking with friends and colleagues of color. Simply checking in and asking friends and family members of color how they are doing and if you can do anything to support them during this time may be of great importance as well. As we educate ourselves, it is important to remember not to burden people of color with questions that we have not taken the time to try and answer on our own first. In my experience, understanding race and race relations in the U.S. requires not only learning about history and current events, but also learning about ourselves. I hope you can learn from my experiences and that as these discussions continue, I can learn from yours as well. These are very important times in the world, in our country, at home, and at TU, and I hope we can all come together to support each other during them. Please be on the lookout for 2 more videos that will take a more in-depth look at the history of race and racism in the U.S., which may provide information about the underlying inclinations to protest, as well as additional ways to support persons of color during this time. Thank you so much.